Namaste. Welcome to the Festival of Bharat. My name is Abhishek and I'll be your host today. As many of you know, yoga is one of the greatest contributions our civilization has made to the world. Now, with many of our ancient texts, this can be very hard for us to digest in modern times. It can be a lot of times very complicated. So I have a very special guest here with me today, Mr. Vasudev Murthy ji, who is here to talk about his new book, the Yoga Sutras Simplified. So welcome to the show. Namaste. Welcome to the show, Vasudev.
Thank you very much, Abhishek. Thank you very much. An absolute pleasure and honor. I'm deeply grateful to you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you're doing great. Thank you
Very well.
for making it to the show as well. So first thing I want to start with is, can you talk about your journey? You talk about it a little bit in your book, but let's start with your journey. So can you describe your relationship with Sanatana Dharma, your relationship with yoga, and how that led you to the journey to eventually write your book?
I think that's a very profound set of questions you're asking me. And obviously, there's been a journey at a certain age and so on. But I will tell you that I am a product of the post-independent India, so to say, from the education system onwards. To that extent, I accept that I have been totally brainwashed. I'm brainwashed. I was not given the right kind of shall we say exposure. I'm talking about the school in terms of a heritage. For example, Sanskrit in particular, right? It was considered a dead classical language, and we were made to feel there was a whole bunch of superstition and there was all these kinds of things. We were a backward kind of a people. Frankly, those subliminal messages work. They work. This it's a very sophisticated way of telling us that somehow we need to look elsewhere for answers and so on, and the answers are right there. So to a question as to Sanatan Dharma and all this stuff, yes, of course, in the family there is a certain set of rituals, activities, and so on and so forth. But given that I was facing dissonance, in school and in the education system by and large, then we always were confused about, at least I certainly was. I can speak for myself. What is the right mix? Where does modernity begin, and are we really a part of a so-called backward thing? So yes, I would say it was a sense of relative indifference. Now, what pulled me back, frankly, was I was deeply into classical music. That was a big saving grace. I'm talking about my Indian classical music. So the myths, the stories have all been there. Our classical music has lots of hooks into our Sanatana Dharma. The names of rag, for example, the rag called Shankara. All these things have they're things that go back. Have I been a ritualistic person? No, to my regret, I have not been. I mean, I should have been, but circumstances happen. Then slowly you start, as exposure begins as to why are you the way you are. You realize that you have been part of a large scheme of somehow underplaying a glorious heritage. And I want to say this very frankly. And therefore, but at the same time, it's a good thing because then you can rebound with a lot of force because you realize that, wait a second, what have I missed all this time? And therefore, my very first book, incidentally, was about classical music. Okay, so that was good. And then, in that book of classical music, there are lots of allusions to our to Sanatan Dharma from a music point of view, right? Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, Shiva, for example, is a constant motif and so on. So we grew up as being very liberal, open to every kind of idea. Sometimes it becomes a bit too much, and we don't realize that we are playing into the hands of certain kinds of people who want us to be that particular way. Nevertheless, I don't want to go off on a tangent. So since you asked about the book, right? Your question was about the journey with the book. So I wrote a book, first book about classical music, and I wrote about organizational theory. I wrote about Sherlock Holmes. I wrote about humor. So I've been writing a number of things, in parallel with my occupation and making a living and so on. But I have always been interested in yoga, and in my book I talk about the fact that yoga asanas was the first way in which I got introduced to yoga. Now that is a classical, typical way that most of us get into yoga is through the asana part because it's exciting, it's interesting, it's intriguing, right? So I too was the same. In fact, oddly enough, my first exposure to yoga asanas was in Dallas when I was working in Dallas many years ago. Then I came back to India, and my dad, pushed me into this very rigorous, no nonsense kind of a yoga school in Bangalore. I mean, it was like no frills. Okay. And that was an eye opener. I needed it at the time. Like everybody else, you go through ups and downs, and so did I. So was I. That started a journey. That started a journey, off and on again. But I was persistent, and because I had, there's some rigor involved, the need to be persistent about it. So as I play the violin as well, so I understood that, and over a period of time, it became better and better and better. And I understood. And these teachers, by the way, would also say that what you're learning is only a small part of the whole essence of yoga. But again, it depends on your maturity of mind and where you are in your life and so on to fully appreciate what they were talking about. Am I speaking too fast, Abhishek? I tend to do that. Is it okay?
No, no,
Can
that's
you hear
fine.
me?
I think you're
That's
good.
fine. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So then some time ago, I guess a couple of years ago, a publisher reached out to me. They knew that I wrote a lot of stuff, and they were aware of my passion for yoga. So they said, we need a new interpretation of the Yoga Sutras. Now that was very intimidating. I mean, I was quite aware that the Yoga Sutras had been written about by many, many great people. Right here in New York City, New Jersey, for that matter. There's somebody called Edwin Bryant in New Jersey. He's written this incredible book about the Yoga Sutras. And then there's BKS Iyengar, there's Swami Vivekananda. So who was I to write about the book? But then I will tell you if you have a question about that as to what makes this book a little different. I do not say it's superior, not at all. My only take is because of my so-called consulting experience and other kinds of things I write about. My view of writing is the writer has to be sensitive about how a reader reads, right? How does a reader in today's modern world consume information? And therefore, I'm sensitive to those kinds of things. What makes a reader stop reading, right? How should information be presented? So I have a little bit of an idea of that. I thought time has come for me to try to do this. And in the same light, many other texts, in my opinion, need that kind of study and analysis. Otherwise, they are just beautiful books to keep on the bookshelf that you feel okay, someday I'm going to read it, but at the moment I don't quite get it. If you understand, I hope I answered your question.
No, that was a great answer. That actually it leads me perfect into my next question, which is pretty much as the name implies, your main goal was to simplify the Yoga Sutras. All right, so how can you go into a little more detail on how you did that, and maybe also talk about like why is it that the original texts are so complicated to begin with?
Okay, so let's start with that. Of course, I do not know. I wasn't there 3,000 years ago, but what I understand is that what I understand is those obviously that was a different time, and less was more in that time. You had to say a lot of stuff in a few words. I don't think writing instruments and all those things, manuscripts, that whole thing was not really that available to everyone. So there was an oral tradition. So how do I get Abhishek to learn something? If you for my son, then I would make it in an oral way, in a certain way which your memory would help you to learn and retain and so on. So many of these things have been passed on because of how these great people were able to compress it in a verbal form, and at some point they were transcribed and written about. Now to get to the point, so I believe that is exactly what has happened in this case as well. There are some theories, was there more than one Patanjali and so on. I don't think that question is that important. As far as I'm concerned, I view Patanjali as this extraordinarily intelligent, one of the greatest intellects that India has had to offer to the world. The amazing, the crystal clear thinking, the ability to take abstractions and simplify them, it is something else. And when I was writing this book, I have to tell you that oftentimes I felt, was I really capable? Could I really do this? Is it going to be? Am I capable? Simple questions like that. So I'm saying that it was so amazing. Now going back to it, what made it? I think your question was, how did I say simplified, right? So simplification. Maybe it sounds like a little. I'm dumbing it down. I don't think that's the case. As I mentioned to you earlier, every book on the Yoga Sutras, to the best of my knowledge, is taken like this. First of all, there are 196 extremely terse, beautiful, lines. Okay, each of those lines is capable of generating a PhD or maybe multiple PhDs. Right. So the way these great spiritual guides and obviously people with far better intellects have addressed this is one sutra at a time. You start with the first sutra. Okay, it starts with Ataha Yoganushasanam. Now begins the discipline of yoga. Now he explains what that means. Then he says Yoga has Chitta Vritti Nirodha. I'm not sure if you're familiar with these words, but he describes the intent of yoga in the first line itself. It says Yoga is a cessation of the mind responding to stimulus. So that is a powerful thing in just a small bunch of syllables right there. Okay. So then they explain what that means, and sometimes there are allusions to other Sanskrit texts. Line 3, line 4, line 5. So this is a linear form. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a fantastic way of addressing it, right? But having said that, if you don't know Devanagari, if you don't know Sanskrit, then you could come to a situation where, as a reader, you might stumble. You might say that, I don't know that Sanskrit, those say, strange things. I haven't been taught that in school. And it may intimidate you. I'm again looking at it from the reader's point of view, right? The reader may, even though he wants to understand it, these peripheral things are distracting, right? And they're saying that I don't know Sanskrit, so therefore I'm going to fall short. I don't know Devanagari, I can't read it, so it's going to be. So what I've done is I've taken the entire set of Yoga Sutras and put them in the appendix. Okay, so if you really want to see the Sanskrit, it's not going to derail you as you start reading about it. That's an important point. Second, I've talked about it from a personal point of view. I've talked about myself as an imperfect person trying to learn it. So I'm trying to connect with the user. I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal and saying that I'm this great guru figure who will teach you all there is to do. That's not the case at all. I'm talking about my shortcomings, my problems, etc., etc. Right? So that's that. I've used graphics. Graphics is a very, very powerful way of conveying information. You will not find them in most of our Sanatan Dharma texts, unless you may disagree with me. I don't know, but I have not found graphics as a prominent way to convey information. And I think we should do that. I think when we are trying to push our philosophies, if we don't use modern techniques, then we shall fail. Right? People don't like to read anymore. The average attention span of most of us is about 4 minutes on any subject, which means it's a writer's responsibility to write it in such a way using all the tools he has so that they get it. So as I said, graphics, and I also try to summarize each thing with three takeaways. That is a takeaway. As you know, today when we go to a training program, we say, what was the takeaway? So like that, in the same way, I have these three takeaways and so on and so forth. So I've collected about 20 yoga sutras at a time in a chapter, used graphics, used personal examples, used takeaways, and taken all the Sanskrit to end. The idea being, make it an easy, simple experience, a non-intimidating experience for the reader. That's it.
No, that's amazing, honestly, because I think you really do take into account how modern people are thinking, especially with the social media generation. People's attention spans are definitely not, are much less than they used to be. So, but one thing I wanted to ask more about, I wanted to elaborate a little more on the Sanskrit aspect. Do you think there can be maybe a problem that, because there's obviously a lot of Sanskrit words are not really translatable to English. Do you
Yeah.
think a lot of
Yeah.
the meaning sometimes it doesn't fully get conveyed when you try to explain it in English?
Well, that's a problem for any kind of translation. But I will say this, and I'm sure you're likely to agree with me. Sanskrit is an extraordinarily scientific, sophisticated language, and once you start burying yourself in it, actually the meaning comes out pretty well. Okay, but if you haven't been exposed to Sanskrit to begin with, certainly you're going to think of it as just one more language. You want to think like that, but actually, and I'm sure you agree with me, it is a really scientific, sophisticated language, and if you just immerse yourself a little bit in it, it becomes a natural, intuitive, obvious kind of a language. You kind of get it immediately, but you have to spend some time on it. You have to look at it from that point of view, right? So that I think is one issue. Now, having said that, I also want to point about, did I learn Sanskrit? Yes, I learned Sanskrit, but look at the way the education system twisted it for us, right? They didn't present Sanskrit as this glorious heritage. It was presented as a classical language. You had to study Sanskrit not for the knowledge that it contained, but for the marks that you're going to get in school. It's different for a young child. Doesn't know what he's missing. He's just memorizing grammar. He's giving the answers the way the teacher is expecting. There is no analysis of our great texts. We are not exposed to the intellectual marvels or that have actually that are our heritage. It's just another dead language, right? So therefore, if your question therefore is, so does this present a problem? I will say yes, it does, and therefore a writer like me, wants us to again, reacclimatize ourselves or become knowledgeable about our past by removing these unfortunate, challenges that we have. right? So I would recommend, if others again would like to look at the same way, Sanskrit. What happens then is, if you are able to capture the attention and you do a successful job in writing about it in an engaging, interesting way, you will automatically want to look at what did the original Sanskrit say, and then you'll be driven towards, you'll be curious. Okay, I see. So maybe the Sanskrit was really, very interesting. That's why I said, right, it's all at the end. I know you can't see it, but this is all at the appendix, and there's a Sanskrit here. Now you will be driven, you'll be motivated to try to learn the language. So I still think there's hope, but I think the modern writer has to understand things are changing. And oddly enough, yoga is all about the stilling of the mind. And you yourself said, right, and we both are agreeing that the modern young generations, minds are all over the place. If there's ever been a time for people to read about the Yoga Sutras, it's actually now. There are so many distractions, and he talks about it, that how to suppress, or at least how to attempt to suppress those distractions to find your real purpose in life.
Okay, so I really like that answer. That I mean, because that actually goes to show how this is something that you have to meet people where they're at. You can't expect them to just
No,
get it, get the height. You can't force Sanskrit onto them. They need to naturally
no,
feel the need to want to learn it. So
that's
I
right.
do like that. And so you mentioned intellectual marvels, right? In the previous answer. So let's talk about Patanjali. So in order to understand the Yoga Sutras, we need to understand who Patanjali is. So can you maybe tell me who is he? What is he known for? There's also a lot of arguments about like when was he alive? Where is he actually
Yes,
from?
yes,
Is did he come down from the heavens? There's all sorts
yeah.
of arguments like that. So maybe give us a little background on who he is.
Okay, sure. So first of all, our tales of the past are very beautiful. And if he came down from the heavens, I'm fine with him. It's beautiful. He came down from the heavens, and the story is very compelling. It's a very lovely tale. So I'll tell you the lovely tale. The lovely tale is that Adishesha, on whom Vishnu is supposed to be residing, expressed a desire to come down and watch, Shiva dance. That's why I have this statue behind me, because there's a reason for that. And so then he was sent down as a serpent into the palms of this lady who was praying to the sun for a son. Okay, he was praying for a son. So he falls down, and then she drops him on the floor, and he basically takes form as half human, half serpent, and asks her to adopt him, and she gives him all her knowledge about yoga. I think it's a very beautiful tale. So is it true? Is it a myth? Is it a fairy tale? I don't know. It's a very beautiful story as far as I'm concerned. It's good enough for me. Now, so some say that he was around 2,500 years ago, 3,000 years ago. There's a lot that we know about him. But what we understand is that he was a master of Ayurveda, of Sanskrit grammar, and about yogic philosophy as well. So then the where he exactly fell is perhaps somewhere near the Himalayas. We don't quite know. But the story then goes that he came down to a town called Chidambaram. If you look at the map, it's not far from Pondicherry. Pondicherry, a lot more people know. Now, Chidambaram is the place of Nataraja, where he was in his dance form, right? And so that's what it is. So Bharatnatyam, the dance, is also supposed to have come from that temple. I mean, it's been inspired from there. So that particular temple, that particular story is really, is pulsating with all kinds of information. If you were to go to the temple, and I would recommend on next trip you think about it, you'll be quite amazed by all the kinds of different things. For example, the priests of that particular temple wear their hair in a certain specific way. It is which you'll never find in any other place. There's something called the Nataraja Stotra, which was written by Patanjali, just to describe the dancing Nataraja. Now, as far as he's concerned, he was one of what they call the 18 siddhas, or self-realized souls. And he watched the dance between Shiva and Parvati at Chidambaram. So this particular dance, this cosmic dance, and so on. So his wish was fulfilled. So it said, now the rest of Tamil Nadu, right? You talked about Sanatan Dharma. I'm just telling you straight now, because of a lot of other kinds of activities, this particular heritage is also under threat. Why do I say that? Because a whole lot of Patanjali stories are all over Tamil Nadu. Okay, from Rameshwaram to small temples to little villages, the little stories all over the place. But because of certain reasons, like certain activities, people are proselytizing and all those stuff. So we are seeing a problem that I think this glorious heritage needs to be protected very, very, very. with a certain desperation, with a certain great urgency. So again, going back to the story about Patanjali, so he is supposed to have we had a lot to do with this particular temple at Chidambaram, and so once the dance was over and so on, the story goes that he decided to teach the Yoga Sutras to a whole bunch of people. That's the story, and then he insisted on teaching from behind a veil, a kind of a curtain, because he said he wanted to go back to his snake form, and from the snake form he wanted multi, 1,000 heads. He wanted to teach each of the 300 students directly. You maybe have read the story. I'm repeating it. So he says, don't take away the curtain because it's dangerous. But obviously, students being students, that's exactly what they did. They took away the curtain, and with the whole poisonous hot blast of air, all of them were burnt to ashes except one student who was late to class. And then Patanjali told him this stuff. So that is the heritage. We understand that he finally went to Rameshwaram, which is at the southern tip of India, and that's where he, went into samadhi. Now, the beauty of this tale, apart from everything that I've said, is how it connects various parts of India, the North India. It came from the Himalayas downstairs. So these fissures that people try to drive between India, South India, North India, they're all really wrong because India has a composite, wonderful culture, has all these stories that bind people together. It is really a remarkable, beautiful, beautiful tale. Now, the fact that Patanjali then gave this brilliant, brilliant piece of knowledge to us, which we give freely and generously to everybody else, is something really, really wonderful. And I must tell you, I'm sorry if I'm taking a little time in answering this, but I thought
No,
it's
that's
important
fine.
to say this. I spoke to a very shall we say a very wonderful lady in California who is a yoga expert, very knowledgeable person, right? And in fact, I went to her for advice because I was aware that she was very knowledgeable. I wanted some advice from her about Patanjali. And she told me this, and I want to use this forum to talk about it. She said, after she answered my question, she said, I want you to mention in your book that you as in we, people of Indian heritage or Hindu heritage, are so fortunate that we have coming down to us through the generations something like the Yoga Sutras. What that happens then is we intrinsically, intuitively feel that it's part of heritage. We get it. We understand it right away. We understand it. We respect it, and we know it's part of us. We like it. We get it. We have. But let's say somebody who is in the U.S., not to speak in any bad way, she said we, on the other hand, don't have this kind of philosophical heritage, spiritual heritage, specifically of this kind of intensity, depth, and sophistication. And she said you must make sure that you write about it in your books, and I have written about it. In summary, Patanjali was this overwhelming cultural icon of Indian thought and philosophy who gave to us and then for us to pass on to everybody else the philosophy of yoga. What is life all about? Why do we do what we do? What is the meaning of reincarnation? What is karma? The whole thing's clearly mentioned in this. He solves the mysteries of life for us, or at least sends us in that direction.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the part that you speak about how it's a pan India sort of identity. He went
It
to
is.
all parts of India, and I mean sometimes it's sad, especially like when you're South Indian, you're sort of sometimes there's this narrative that like this Sanatana Dharma is not yours. It's
No,
some like other it's like a North Indian thing or it's a foreign thing, and it's like come
no.
on, like it's our
It is, it
heritage.
is, it is.
It
But
doesn't
that,
belong to any
that
one group.
narrative, Abhishek, that narrative is a mischievous one, deliberately planted by extremely intelligent people. The idea is to create divisions, and we want division because, from a sociological perspective, people actually like that kind of division. Any group more than six or seven automatically starts splitting. So that's what they want, and we lap it up. We have to be really careful about it. There are many such stories. I'll tell you one more story, if you don't mind me telling you about it. There's a story that you may know about this. That when we conduct the last rites of our ancestors who have passed away, we go to this place called Gaya in Bihar. Are you aware? There's a place called Gaya. And you're supposed to do one part of it in a place called Gaya, which has to do with the body of this demon or Rakshasa, which goes from Bihar, Gaya, all the way down to Andhra Pradesh. The story is that his body is somehow along. So there is a chain of temples going from Bihar in the north all the way down, three important temples along the body of this thing. Where was North India? Where was South India? There was nothing like that. It was just a lovely story. The same thing if you look at the story of Ramayana, okay, whether you're talking about the various temples, the temple circuit, or the straight lines of the Shiva temples, then Rameshwaram, Nasik, there's this integrated thing which is part of us that we should feel moved to tears. This is our India, which is given rise to such beautiful stories and things that bind us together. But on the contrary, because there are people who want to split India for a number of reasons, you find these artificial things, and they discount all these stories as superstitions, as as not worth. But frankly, the sophistication of people like Patanjali and others shows that Sanskrit or whatever, the whole story comes together, India as one. Anyway, more of that.
So actually, I wanted to ask a little more about Patanjali. Obviously, this knowledge, it's knowledge that has existed, I think, maybe prior to his time, like the knowledge
Certainly,
of
yeah,
yoga.
likely. Mm.
So, what was it about? Was it something about his writing style or the way he compiled all the knowledge that made his work so effective?
Well, as we started off, we discussed the fact that I don't even know if he wrote it in the conventional sense, right? According to what I know, and I could well be wrong. It was part of an oral tradition to begin with. You had to speak in a tight, compressed way to convey your information because that was a way to remember stuff. You memorized these things. You didn't actually read off stuff. You just by repetition, and then you passed it on. So, but it couldn't have been easy because even that, we can't discount it. How he could have come up with these ways in which to remember, because we're talking about highly complex ideas distilled in a few syllables, and for us to digest, to understand, and say, what was that all about, and he succeeded. He succeeded very, very well. Luckily, people started writing about it, and I think Swami Vivekananda was probably one of the persons who brought it up to light. But in the meanwhile, the whole issue of asanas was also talked about because that is the more visible part, and people enjoy it, they get it, they like it. It's very interesting. So that may have been a hook where his writings suddenly came into more prominence. Now, I can't comment more about the Ayurvedic part and also the grammar part because I'm not knowledgeable about that. I can tell you about this. That 196 sutras, it's a joy to, because it's Sanskrit, first of all, and Sanskrit is a very, really beautiful language. Just enunciation of those syllables is itself joyful. So 196 lines of great wisdom spoken with great beauty. That's how I would call it. Did he write it or did he think about it and then convey it? I'm afraid I can't specifically say.
I see. I think, like you mentioned, it's less important where he's from, or how what did he come down from the heavens. It's more the work that he provided us with.
The
So
story is also
that's
beautiful.
I
The
think
story is
that's
also
the beauty
beautiful.
of it.
I think the
Yeah,
stories
that's
are,
true.
stories are lovely. They tell us that India has for example, one of his, as I said, his part serpent. He also had a friend in these journeys who was supposed to be a person with tiger paws. Okay, so all these stories are delicious, are delicate, and they have esoteric meanings behind them as well. So some very intelligent people have given us a great heritage that we should respect.
Definitely. Thank you very much. So now let's get into the main part of the discussion, right? Let's discuss what are the Yoga Sutras. If you can briefly explain it.
Sure.
I know Patanjali breaks it into the four chapters. Can you
Yeah.
tell us what those four chapters are?
Sure, sure. I get it. So let's begin first by saying that there are 196 lines, which I've already spoken about, right? And before I get into that, I want to talk about the issue of what communication theory is about. Now, in my avatar as a management consultant, I also teach business communication, right? And there are a number of theories of how to communicate for maximum impact, right? So when I was going through the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, I realized that he had cracked this code 2000 or 3000 years ago already. He knew how to grab your attention. You couldn't leave it. Now, for example, if I asked you, I said, Abhishek, can you write to me and can you write an essay on the problems of global warming, for example, right? Now, I'm just guessing, since we are meeting for the first time, how would we approach it? We'll say, okay, let's talk about the data first. The temperature's going up, emissions are going up, and people are dying, the modern diseases, etc., blah, 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 blah. And therefore, we need to be concerned about global warming, etc. That would be a classical way of approaching any problem. But at the same time, in modern lives times, we don't have time for all this. We want you to get to the point ASAP. And that's what Patanjali has done. So he starts with that. So the whole structure of these 196 lines reflects a man who understood the value of communication and grabbing the attention of whoever is listening or who's reading. So he, rather than postponing your appreciation of what yoga is to the 196th line, saying, oh, blah, 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 and therefore this is what is yoga, he comes to it from the very first line. He says, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, which says yoga is the control of that mind where it doesn't respond to stimulus. Now that simple line is so powerful, and then the rest of the 195 lines talk a little bit about all that. Okay, so I'm just giving you a point about how he structured it. So he's divided into 4 sections. I will take a minute to talk about them. The first is called the Samadhi Pada. Samadhi is the final state of what you want to be in. This is our purpose in life. We want to merge with the infinite, what have you. So therefore, the first 51 lines is a description of Samadhi, the kinds of Samadhi, the impediments to Samadhi, the kind of thing that will stop you. And there is a concept called the perfect person, called Ishvara, Pranavaha, etc. So this first 51 lines is all about the state of Samadhi. Now I've got Abhishek's interest. So Abhishek says, wow, so that's Samadhi. And the next question is, so how do I get there? And that's the second chapter. There's a second chapter called the Sadhana Pada, right? Where he talks about the process of getting to that lovely state of Samadhi. And that's when he talks about, the distractions, the fear, the 5 kleshas, they call the kleshas, and so on and so forth. Things that keep us going, the ego that comes between us and realization. It's a lovely chapter. And this is where he talks about the 8 limbs of yoga. With your permission, I will just recite it. It just take a second, because in one sentence he says, this is the journey to yoga. And again, the master communicator, the master structural engineer, I will explain that. So he says, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, ashto angani. Ashto means 8. These are the 8 limbs of yoga. There we have it. Now, is it a random description, a random list? Not at all. Yama refers to the outward behaviors you need to exhibit first, then a control of your personal discipline, which includes minimalism, austerity, self-study, a lovely kinds of mental things that you need to start doing. Then you come to the asana part, which everybody, I guess, knows and considers to be synonymous with yoga, which is about keeping your mind fit and supple. Then we move on to the next issue of the breath, which is how do you handle your breath, and there's a lot we can talk about that. The next is about the subtle part of the management of your senses. Why do we respond to a smell? Why do we respond to the 5 senses? So how do you manage those 5 senses? It's called pratyahara. This is again a structured way of communicating. It's incredible, from the completely, shall we say, tangible to the least tangible, which is the senses, in that sense, right? And then he moves inside. He calls it dharana, which is your desire to concentrate. Dhyana is the next level of concentration, where you kind of feel you're part of that thing. And samadhi is finally the completely merging with that thing. So we're talking about these 8 extremely well layered. So this is called this in the sadhana pada. He talks about all this in great detail. Actually, he talks about the first 5. Then the third, the 6th, 7th, 8th is in the vibhuti pada. The vibhuti pada is about, if I remember, 55 or 56 lines, where he talks about a very interesting thing. A lot of people find this particular section to be a bit very esoteric. The reason is he talks about, as the yogi goes into this sadhana, this discipline, this tough kind of regimen, then he will automatically develop certain powers. Okay, powers of intuition, powers of weightlessness, powers of being invisible, powers of time travel, what have you. So you may think it's all mumbo jumbo. That's not the case at all. It's just that as the yogi develops more and more, shall we say, ability to, he goes in the direction he wants to, then slowly these kinds of powers are literally emitted from you, or you develop them, or they become more visible. And he wants that, you can be therefore sidetracked. Now, why this thing is important is because many of our stories, talk about this, people moving from this place to be this place, having infinite power. So they were all yogis. quite capable of incredible feats that you and I will, because we're supposedly westernized and modernized, we will laugh at them because we'll say it doesn't bear the scrutiny of science. And I really don't care. I mean, I think this is our philosophy. He talks about this in great detail. So the third chapter is about what I can call, the risks of this whole practice. You will develop practice and you may be sidetracked from it. The analogy I want to draw to your attention to is that when you churn butter, the real thing that excites you is the thick part of the butter, which is on the periphery of the churn. But the real deal is the liquid at the bottom, which is colorless and not very interesting. But in the same way, in this business of yoga, you may get sort of all these powers which will sidetrack you. But the real deal is the ability is something else. And finally, the fourth chapter of about 34, which is considered the most complex, right? So that one it talks about further issues of samadhi. Okay, it's called Kaivalya Pada, the solitary, the beauty of absolute solitary merging. Okay, so that is what the last chapter of it is. Along the way come concepts of time, concepts of karma, concepts of gunas. A lot of absolutely mind-blowing concepts which basically lays it out for you. Why is Vasudev the way he is? Why is Abhishek the way he is? Why does he respond in that way? What is time? Is there actually a past? Is there actually a present? Everything in graphic detail is there for the asking. Okay, so that is what these 196 brilliant lines are all about, divided into these four chapters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. So the third chapter I find kind of interesting. So that you described it as almost like a warning of what
Yeah.
could potentially happen. Now, you did mention it comes across a little esoteric, and it may be it seems a little bit like supernatural or whatever. But my question is, could it actually be something that's much more grounded in reality? Like, so through the process of doing the breathing and the asana and all these different techniques, maybe you do become physically more capable, or you're
You
mentally just
do.
more
You do.
capable, and
You
because
are.
of that you kind of get distracted, and you start engaging in the physical world too much because you're like, you're more effective at your job, or you're more effective at whatever it is, maybe a physical activity. And maybe is that what they mean by you could get distracted that way?
That's exactly right. I think you couldn't have I couldn't have said it better. You're exactly right. He just says that when you practice something so well. I mean, here's an example of that. Right? Let's say I'm a violinist. Okay, I'm just okay. Now, if I were to play the violin or any musical thing, I might reach levels of such fine perfection that I might be dazzled by my own brilliance, and the point is lost right there. Right? Yeah, it's something else that you're looking for, and because you become so good, the ego once again comes up and says, I'm this incredible character, it's all me, which is not true at all. You just practice. So your point is absolutely right. I think because we are stuck in our day jobs or whatever it is. I mean, we have enough stories, documented stories, and we just dismiss them. People surviving, for with who not had been breathing for days, for months. People who are able to control their hearts, yogis who survive in the coldest possible climate. They don't eat anything, they don't breathe. Are they crackpots? Of course not. They're yogis. They are advanced souls, and we have a long way to go before we understand that. So I mean, as a simple test to you, can you imagine? I don't know your dietary things. Let's assume for a minute that you like, I don't know, say a samosa or something. You pass by a store that's making samosa. You're attracted by that smell. Can you control your response? Very difficult, easier said than done. You're probably salivating almost immediately. So those kinds of self-control, those mechanisms, very, very complicated. It takes obviously literally years of consciously thinking about it, consciously being aware that I am not going to be swayed by that, right? And sometimes even
Right.
watching yourself in pain, watching yourself in hunger. My yoga asanas teacher used to say sometimes when you do certain things, there will be pain. It's just part of the process of muscles opening up. Well, don't get entranced by the pain. Observe the pain. you know Easier said than done. Can you do that? Not for everyone. So, I mean, to get back to your point, you're absolutely right. And that applies to practically anything. The minute you feel that you're bigger than, the art or thing, then, you've lost the whole battle for yoga.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's amazing. So now I want to talk about we talked about asana, right? So
Yeah,
and today, obviously, many people think of yoga as
yeah,
pretty much asana. They limit it to
yeah.
asana. So
Mm.
can you kind of explain why this is wrong, and also, but at the same time, what there is a role that asana plays in yoga.
Yeah, it does. It
So it
does.
is
It
still
does.
important. So can you kind of just explain the two
I certainly
aspects?
will. I certainly will. Let me answer the second question first. I described to you the eight
Okay.
brilliantly structured things, and they are not in a random order, they are in a sensible order. External discipline, how you deal with the world. And in that, the very first thing I must say is ahimsa. Okay, the Yama is the first one. It's the five observances towards the out five. And the very first thing is ahimsa in thought, word, and deed. This is not Gandhi's creation. Okay, this is going back many centuries, which says so. So why are they doing all this? Okay, it is to mellow the mind. It is to soften the mind, so that when you start the process of meditation and going towards samadhi, you would have achieved a whole lot of control over practically all dimensions of life, right? So yama is social behavior, how you deal with others and so on. Then again, as I said, niyama is the second one, is about how you don't covet anything, how you are satisfied with whatever you have. And that's very difficult in this day and age. And all the CNN tells you, BBC tells you, millions being made, Tesla's so and so is a billionaire. They're telling you that your life is less than what it should be. They're telling you you should be in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction. They're drilling you with ambition, lust, greed. You must do well. You must dominate. So these messages are very powerful. And to be able to control that and say, no, you can tell me I have no ambition. That's all right. I'm happy with the way things are. It doesn't, in today's language, that sounds like the language of a loser, right? But that's not so. What he's saying is learn to be satisfied with what you have. Don't compare. So these are beautiful life lessons. Now you come to the point about asanas, right? So the asana part is where you get your body ready for what? For long periods of meditation. So first, if you don't know how to deal with the outside world, if you don't know how to control your fundamental temperament, you don't know how to have a physically fit body, in the sense supple body, more than I would say all parts totally humming with harmony. Then your breath is managed, and then you can control your senses. Now you are ready to meditate. So if I just tell you, hey, let's meditate after this, yeah, you probably can, but it's not the same thing. So ask the role of asanas is basically to keep you in a state where you can sit comfortably for long periods of time, instead of saying, this is hurting, that's hurting, my back's hurting, and also in the process of asanas, you develop rigor and focus. For example, there are many balance things which involve balance. You can't be in a state of balance unless you learn how to focus. So these are lessons for us, and you're supposed to learn how to be in a particular asana in the state for long periods of time, breathing softly, gently, etc., etc. Somebody once said that if in a state of any asana, if your breath becomes labored or you start sweating, please stop right there. Okay? And talking about breath, one of the first things that he talks about in the Samadhi Pada is the first sign of an unquiet mind is a change in the breathing pattern. If you're agitated, those five things he talks about, the five distortions of the mind, the first impact is going to be on your breath. So going back to asanas, therefore, you learn to be in those uncomfortable positions and learn how to breathe normally, quietly, gently. That would be a very beautiful thing. Now to your first question. Now, people mistake it, and I don't think there's any ill intent behind it. This is what they've been told, that yoga is yogasanas, right? So let's not fault them. The way I'm more liberal about this. A lot of I get people say, no, 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 that's not yoga, etc. Look at my own journey, and I can take my own reference. I did the same thing. I was attracted. I went to a yoga school thinking asana, and that was asanas. So I was doing that. It took time, experience, advice for me to be told that that's not the only thing. There's more to it. So for every 10 of us who go for asanas and think this is yoga, sooner or later some of us will make the journey and go towards learning the larger philosophy of yoga. So asanas being just 1/8 of it, the other seven eighth of it is waiting to be discovered. So if asanas is the first way, okay, it may not be the most ideal way, but it is a way, it does attract people, and people who go there over a period of time do indeed get a kind of a greater sense of understanding. They go into the study of the Yoga Sutras. They try to apply. If you look at Instagram and look at all the yoga pictures over there of people posing, most of them give a philosophical twist to whatever they're trying to do, which means they have understood. It's not that I'm boasting that I can twist like this. They'll give something, life is about peace, etc. They take a different angle. So I would say, so it's not correct, but it's not wrong either. You asked about is it wrong? It's a gate into the whole philosophy, and I'm okay with it.
So I guess it's kind of like meeting people where they're at, similarly with
Yes.
how you
Yeah.
structured your book. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
I think that's
if so, Abhishek, if I were to say, let me open a yoga school and start teaching you how to be nice to other people, I don't think anyone will sign up for it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to kind of, I guess, present it as it's like a
Yes.
fitness thing, or it's a mindfulness sort of,
Mindfulness thing. Yeah.
mental
Sure.
health. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. You have to meet people where they're at.
Yes.
So yeah, but can you also explain now that there's what does it mention? The eight
Limbs
limbs
of
of
yoga.
yoga,
Eight limbs of yoga. Yeah.
eight limbs of yoga. So now it seems like it's very structured that you almost have to go in that particular order. Now, is there when someone does just asana or just the breathing, does that kind of are they leaving a lot on the table, so to speak? Like, are they leaving a huge part of the practice on the table?
Unfortunately, my answer is that yes, that's true. So, you'll hear people saying, I do pranayama, I do breath, breathing. Good
Hmm.
for you. And I'm sure it's giving you good results. But, the thing is, you should be at least aware that there's a lot more to it. Now, when you approach it,
Right.
it depends on your time, when you are in a position to do so. The passage of time, experiences in life, all that will attract you to different parts of these things. In the ideal case, for ideal person who says, I want to learn yoga the right royal way, you will probably learn it like that. You probably, it's not to say that you don't learn limb 4 before you finish, but it will become more logical and supposedly easy to do that. So I think
Right.
it's possible to do it. I mean, yes, if you just start doing breathing exercises alone without having paid attention to the other things, you may not be able to achieve the full purpose of yoga, in my humble opinion. But you
Okay.
will get there soon. You will get there soon as well. At least you've started somewhere.
All right. No, that's awesome. So, so now you mentioned a little bit about the five mental modifications
Yeah.
that
Yes.
Patanjali describes. So now,
He
what
does.
exactly are these? And he also talks about he puts a lot of emphasis on having control over your brain. So, pretty much, what are these five mental modifications, and how do we control them?
The second question needs a different way of expressing it, but let me come to your first
Okay.
first one. The five of them, as he defines, it's so logical that you'll say, "What's the big deal?" But your mind is being altered at any time by one of these five. For
Okay.
example, valid inference or the truth. Something is happening. For example, you and I are currently speaking, on Zoom or whatever the case is. So that is
Hmm.
it's true, right?
Yeah.
An invalid inference, therefore, can be a lie. For example, I might say that you and I are holographic images, over here. It's not true. So
Hmm.
again, but your mind can be affected by truth or by falsehood. That's straight. I mean, it's
Okay.
so logical. I don't know what to say. It's clearly there. Then imagination. Suppose I say that today I see the moon is green and it's on fire. It's an imagination. It's just something I just cooked up, right? So even imagination is altering my because I imagine something. Now your mind is also being altered by what I just said. That imagining the moon on fire, for example, right? Okay, simple thing.
Hmm.
Sleep. In other words, the dreams that emerge from sleep, which seem to be
Okay.
illogical, but perhaps there's a logic there. But whatever it is, your mind it has been affected. You may remember tomorrow after you sleep if you had a nightmare or some pleasant dream, something was not okay or something was good. I dreamt something, I can't remember what it was. But clearly your mind somewhere has been impacted, right? And the last is memory. memory of your childhood, memory of somebody you loved, whatever it is. So these are the five things. Whatever you experience in life is likely to fall under these five groups. I think it is actually, right? It's the
Yeah.
truth, lie, memories, imagination, dreams, etc. Those are the things. I view this as, a diamond which is covered by fog, by smoke, mist, cobwebs, and it's always getting affected by these, the constantly like little neutrons or pieces of light which are coming from valid inferences, the falsehoods, all these kinds of things. So these are the five things. Now to your questions, can we control them? This question needs a different kind of answer, which is what the Yoga Sutras is all about, right? And he talks about those 8 steps that you have to work on. As you start doing that, the impact of those five modifications starts becoming less. Can it
Uh,
be eliminated completely? I don't know if that's actually possible in a specific lifetime. You must remember that, we talk about reincarnation, lifetimes, and all this kind of stuff. So when we are able to, so the whole issue of karma is also talked about. The time that we realize that I'm reacting like this in a certain predictable way, and I'm able to stop my reaction, that's when the karmic baggage starts becoming a little less. So again, going back to these five modifications, these modifications leave imprints. They may carry forward in this life. They may carry forward in subsequent lives. We really can't say. But at least the path is shown. That try to develop yama, niyama, asana, etc. Along the way, you'll soon be able to at least manage your mind. Can you eliminate it? It's very difficult. Even the state of samadhi, he talks about two, three of them. These imprints of your lifetime, which he calls samskaras, etc. They call it samskaras. Oftentimes are impacted even in samadhi, and they can be taken forward in the subsequent life. I hope I answered your question. I'm not trying to make it too difficult. I'm just saying that this is, Patanjali's caution to us.
okay, no, I think I really like that answer. Um, so it's kind of interesting because it's almost not even about like there's no real sense of like what's considered moral or immoral because both you have to have both a truth and untrue and lies. You should be equally not affected by either of them. But can I ask, what exactly would you say is the difference between imagine something that's imagination and something that's a lie?
Well,
Because both are not exactly real.
no, 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 no. They are not real, but the lie, perhaps there was an intent behind it. Imagination is, just
I see.
creativity. I'm
Okay.
just, yeah. But I'm,
I
I'm
see. I
lying
see. Okay.
deliberately to you. Yeah, you act because of my lie.
Okay. I got it. Okay. So I think we had a very good conversation. Is there
I think
any
so too.
closing remarks you wanna make?
Yes, I'd like to. I'd like to. Like I said, right. I love the question about the Sanatan Dharma and so on and so forth. We the logic, the piercing, brilliant intellect of Patanjali. This is my study, and I don't even think I'm necessarily spiritually gifted. I don't think I have been given, in my lifetime, I have not had the chance to become this kind of great spiritual scholar that I can quote, texts like this. I can't say, in Rig Veda so and so or something else. I don't have that kind of bandwidth. So, therefore, this particular book, and I think a lot of people are like me, and that's why I said, this is simplified for a common man. And I describe myself in the book again and again as a common man. Do not expect me to wear a certain set of clothes or have an ashram and have followers. I don't think I have the kind of depth to be able to do that, to be perfectly honest. But Patanjali Yoga Sutras gives direction to your life. It tells you why you are born. Why are you born? Why do you behave the way you behave? Why do you respond in certain ways? What must you do to take control of your life rather than feeling that you're just a complete, just responding to things all the time? Something happens, you respond. Something else happens, you respond. And the manner in which you respond, all of it seems to be like, is that you? Is that really me? Who is doing all this stuff? So these profound philosophical questions, which I'm sure you have thought about, I have thought about, why am I here? What's going to happen to me? These are answered very, very brilliantly in this book. Now, I think we will, unless we experience things, we can't fully appreciate this. So for a very young audience, this is not even a fair book to actually ask them. I'm talking about, let's say, the teens. It's nice to say, be good, be nice, but the sermonizing, moralizing, a lot of young people don't like it. They want to, for them, life is new, there's so much about to happen. But at a certain time, beyond 25, 30, suddenly you start thinking, what is this all about? You become more serious about stuff. And I think this book can be a fantastic, I'm talking about the Yoga Sutras. I have just talked about my book in the sense that I've tried to make it an accessible read. I've talked about my own experiences as an imperfect person, right? I've talked about music and its impact on various kinds of specific situations. I've used graphics because I understand people get information faster, right, through graphics. So you can see that as well. So I just think Patanjali Yoga Sutra is a great heritage, cultural, spiritual, intellectual heritage that we have been fortunate enough to receive. It's our duty, in a sense, to at least get acquainted. Who is this man? What did he say? Can I benefit in some positive way from it? That's my humble request to all of you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time, Vasudev Ji. And for the
Thank you, sir.
audience, please like, share, subscribe, comment, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Citti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.